Good morning all, me again, I'm sorry to say. And this time with slides, which is quite unusual for me, so let's see how this goes, shall we? So, many of you should be aware now of the Connected Vehicle Services Framework, the CVS framework. We've been talking about this since probably December. We've run workshops for public sector and private sector to start to introduce the principle of a connected services framework. And what I want to do is kind of go over that again, because we are moving forward and we are moving to a point soon where we will be able to talk about funding and pilots and how we actually, as Kerry's just said, how we move from policy into delivery. So I want to go over the framework again. And sorry if some of you have seen this presentation before, but I think it's valuable to repeat what we've said, because it is a new concept and we are really trying to get people to think about a new way of thinking about how connected vehicle data could be used, and just thinking about data generally as a resource that is massively underused in the sector at the moment. I think just going back to the presentation we had just before the break from Michael Jordan at TPX, there are lots of creative ways in which we could and should be using data to deliver better services, and the framework is an attempt to try and deliver that. So what are connected services? Fundamentally, and there's lots of ways you can describe this, but to think about it simply, fundamentally, we have vehicles and we have infrastructure. Now, vehicles may be cars and trucks and buses, they may be pedal cycles, there may be people travelling on public transport. We have a number of ways in which we travel around the network, and increasingly there is data available within those vehicles. Those vehicles have increasing levels of sensing built into them. We carry apps that deliver data. We know that if you have a modern vehicle, it's already sensing things and sharing huge amounts of data with the manufacturer. That's absolutely the case. Even if you drive an older vehicle, if you have a mobile phone on you, you are a connected vehicle. You are generating data in some form. There is a huge amount of data in the vehicle fleet, in the users of vehicles, that we could benefit from. And we heard this morning about DFRS, and data for road safety. We heard about safety-related traffic information, and there are a whole range of ways of thinking about this and ways of benefiting from it. But fundamentally, there is a lot of data in vehicles. Or vehicles, as I appear to put on the slide there. Actually, I generated those icons with AI, which is slightly concerning, isn't it? Well done, Copilot. Is infrastructure spelt right? Yeah, it is. There is increasingly a lot of data in the infrastructure too. We are seeing technologies being deployed in the infrastructure now, and we're seeing iterations of the technology we already use for urban traffic management. So we're seeing technologies like MyCity and Fusion, developments of traditional UTC technologies that can generate more data, can generate more intelligence, can provide data in new formats. We're seeing new entrants, we're seeing increasing amounts of technology used in the infrastructure and new ways of thinking about databasing the stuff that we have. That means that the infrastructure also has a lot more data in it. You think about those together, you get connected services, you get data in vehicles that can help the infrastructure do the job better, you get data in the infrastructure that can help us inform motorists and road users and travellers better. It allows users to become more informed. This is fundamentally what we're talking about with the Connected Services Framework. So what are we talking about? Talking about a framework for considering a likely range of services, and this isn't at a technical level. We're not yet talking about the detailed technologies. We're not talking about standards and how we would implement them, although we know there's a lot of work there. We know that around Europe there are lots of standards we could use, there are lots of technologies we use. There are lots of connected services happening often in a proprietary way at the moment that we can think about. There's lots going on, but we need to think about what are the range of services we could deliver. And this goes back to what Michaela was showing earlier on government starting to think about the use cases for technology and how that will impact the way that we travel, the way that we consume transport, the way that we're informed about the journeys we make. The framework is about providing a toolkit for thinking about that, thinking about, as a country, what services would we aspire, what services would we like to promise users in 10 years that they will have while they're travelling, what services would we like to promise road operators that in 10 years they will have to manage their networks better. That's what the Connected Vehicle Services Framework is about, and it allows us then to think about those services in terms of what policy they deliver. And as we said earlier, this isn't about technology, it's about how we deliver better policy, better outcomes. How can we group the services that we think about in terms of the policies we can impact and the changes we can make for transport and wider society. So this is a mechanism for how we think about future transport policy. Now, my second use of AI, God, I hope this is better than the first one. I had a slide that had a very detailed set of paragraphs on it which describe why, in government terms, it's important to think about connected services. And I thought, let's give that to Copilot, see what it does. So I did, and I said, just produce me a word map. Find me the important things in there, and it's actually done quite well. You know, we're talking about services. We're talking about services that users can consume to provide better information, better network management, safer roads, reduce congestion. Services that can do that. That is important. We're talking about how the network works. We're talking about a strategy. We're talking about risk. We're talking about how do we de-risk decisions around investing in technology by showing how that technology can lead to better outcomes that politicians and the public want and need. You know, we are talking about roads. Anyone here think we're talking about rail or maritime? You're in the wrong conference? No, we're all talking about road. That's good. And we're talking about benefits, and there are all kinds of other little words in there that it's pulled out. But I think that's done quite a good job of kind of setting why we should be doing this. Now, of course, you could say, well, this sort of happens anyway. You know, I drove here yesterday. I used Waze. I pedal around and I use Strava or Garmin. I have apps for all kinds of other things. You could say, well, it's all happening anyway. What's really the point? The point is that the market is developing at the moment in what you could describe as a slightly dystopian way, where we buy services and data is locked into services, and services don't necessarily integrate, and service providers, none of you in this room, you're all extremely honourable in this room, but there are service providers out there who maybe don't want to tell you that much about where their data is coming from and how it's derived. There are ways in which you can get locked into providing, consuming services from particular users, and that's fine. That's how innovation develops. But going forward, we want to maximise the benefits of the services that data can provide for all road users. Be you rich or poor, urban, rural, able-bodied, less mobile, whatever. We want services to be delivered equally, equitably across the whole network. So we want services that are delivered in a more utopian way, where the standards and the data is as freely available. Maybe not free to purchase, because there's still cost and reward in here, but freely available, open, and able to be shared and used to build services that work for people. And that's I feel the main government intervention is to try and build that open framework that allows services to develop in as open way as we possibly can. And again, we've heard this morning from some of the other DFT speakers and from Patricia at the start of the day. This is about feeding into some really big issues. This is about feeding into how we deliver cleaner transport, how we support safer, better services for road users, and how we generate financial benefit and boost competitiveness and do a whole range of things that the UK wants to do that we've set out in the industrial strategy, in the AI strategies, that we've set out in the road safety strategy and the forthcoming intelligent transport strategy. These are all things that we want to deliver. These are all things that the country at a very high level wants to do. And better connected services in road transport can help deliver a range of those. Some of them directly. And I mentioned earlier the road safety targets that we have, which are incredibly ambitious. We won't meet those targets by incrementally doing the things we do now around road safety better. We will meet those targets by fundamentally changing the way that we use the road network. If we want to reduce killed and seriously injured accidents by 65% in 10 years, that needs a fundamental change, and technology, data-driven services will be at the core of that. Public transport will be delivered more effectively in the future, certainly as we start to see autonomous and different sized vehicles and a move away from the traditional sort of 60-seat diesel bus. As we see that migration, technology and data and services will be fundamental to that. Others more generally, the competitiveness of the UK will depend on how competitive sectors like this are, where we really have an opportunity to be right at the forefront of development and innovation. So just to go into a bit of the detail about how we think about connected services, because it's important that we have a framework, because if we don't, we end up with a very complex, very muddy kind of position of, well, what do we mean? How do we order all this? How do we think about who needs to be funded, how investment will work? It's important that we start to think about that. So we're thinking about this initially in three streams, and we've talked about these briefly a few seconds ago. Infrastructure to vehicle. There is data and intelligence in the infrastructure that could be exposed to users in vehicles, and that's a public sector responsibility. That's about exposing data, about building the public sector systems that drive the infrastructure in ways that exposes data and exposes information. The private sector can then think about building apps and using that and incorporating it into vehicles and other devices and whatever. But fundamentally, we need to think about how we support the public sector to make better use of its infrastructure data. And TPX talked a lot about that. They're doing that in other sectors. Fundamentally, this is no different to what's happening with the planning system or the land registry. It's about how do we invest in the public sector to expose data better. I think that's a key thing for this room. We are generally in this room, we are generally infrastructure owners or operators or providers. That's important. Stream 2, which Daniel would have talked about more this morning because this sits more in his division of the department. Stream 2 is about how do we access that data that we know is there in vehicles, that we know a vehicle, if you buy a modern vehicle, it has data, lots of it. Data for road safety is starting to expose that. We know that mobile phones generate data. We know that lots of apps and devices do. How do we ensure that that data is available? How do we ensure that the standards are in place, that the market is attractive and the market blockers are removed where they need to be removed to ensure that that data, where usable by the public, is available to be used by the public? And that's not all data. We're not saying we're going to go to Mercedes and say, we demand you open up all the data you have about your vehicles for public use. We're not going to do that. Mercedes is richer than the British government to start with, but it's just not the way the world works. But we do need to continue that development we've seen around things like data for road safety, to incrementally work with the sector to open up data where it's important. And then once that data is available, work with the infrastructure providers and work with others to ensure that we use that data for the best good we can get from it. So those are the two main streams that we're working on. A third stream of how we think about all this is around, in the future, we will have more complex two-way services, and we will be able to do things like bridge tolling and payment for parking and payment for in-vehicle services as a kind of a consume and pay kind of two-way process in vehicles. And we know that whole principle of enhanced in-vehicle payment and infotainment and is a thing that will happen. And a lot of it will happen in the private sector, and a lot of it will be driven by those who can see more value in the things they sell, be they cars or whatever, being able to provide those services. But it will impact the public sector. It will impact the way that people pay for parking. It will impact the way that people interact with the rules of the road. And as we think about tolling, as we think in the future about how we charge for use of the road network, that Stream 3 two-way connectivity will become important, and it will become important that we think about how we build those back offices and interactions that allow two-way services to form. So just a little bit more detail. I'm not going to read through this in any great detail, but basically, we have infrastructure data that allows us to describe the road, to provide strategic information about roadworks and other things, to provide tactical information like how green light priority is working, where blue light vehicles are, and so on and so forth. And a lot of this you're going to see tomorrow in the live demo that we have, because a lot of this it's not future. A lot of this is here now. We can do this kind of thing now if we can just get the framework to do it right. So we have lots of opportunity we have there. In terms of vehicle to infrastructure data, vehicles can tell us about road surface condition and environmental conditions. They already do that. There are already companies, some in this room, that are providing that data, and we're seeing great benefit from that. But that can be expanded and enhanced, and we can think about how we can do that in a more common, open way. We can think about travel times and congestion and queuing and vehicles' ability to tell us about the situation they find themselves in real time. Save us from putting lots of expensive technology, lots of expensive sensing on the network, which, again, is a drag on resources. The more technology you put out there, the more it costs. If you can get data from vehicles, that may alter the way in which you put infrastructure on the network. It may not only provide better data, but also data more cheaply. And then data from vehicles has the ability to support digital twins, and as George talked about earlier, and the way that we plan and model and give priority to certain vehicle types, vehicles can help with that. And then, as I say, there are a whole range of other things that we can do about how we manage activity and pay for services in the future that form a third stream that is maybe more embryonic. But certainly Stream 1 and 2 is about doing stuff with data that's there now. It's about how we open up that data, how we share it, how we implement the standards, how we build... Oh, God, I'm going to use the word ecosystem. Is Andy Graham in the room? I owe Andy £1 for using the E word. But how do we build that? How do we build that environment that allows data to be shared and services to flourish? So again, just to make that point again, We have connected services now. We have sat-nav. We have public transport. We have e-call. We have vehicle services. We think about EV charging, which is already about sharing data about where charge points are, where they're in use, and all kinds of other things. We have vehicles that already talk about maintenance back to their operator and whatever. We have a whole range of services that some of which we've had for years and never really thought about as being connected services, but that's what they are. We've already tried many things that again, some of these you'll see tomorrow. And if you've been to the successful days that we've done at UTAC, the Millbrook testing facility down in Bedfordshire, you will have seen us demonstrate in-vehicle signing and green light optimization, roadworks warning, hazard location, and how we manage the asset. These aren't future things. These are things we can do now. We just need to get on and work out how to do it in a way that works for all. And that's really what the connected vehicle services is about. Encompassing that into a framework that we can all understand, we can all point in the same direction, we can all see what we need to do in terms of policy intervention, in terms of funding, in terms of R&D and delivery. It allows us to start to think about how we deliver that in a more open way. So the framework is in development now, and we'll be able to say a little bit more over the next couple of days about where it's going. But what fundamentally what it becomes a set of a set of groups of things we can do that align with different policies, and whether that's about traffic management or support for authorities or fleet or logistics, there are some high-level areas in which services can deliver improvements and deliver benefits. Those high-level groupings allow us to target who we're really talking to, who do we want to do some work or development to deliver these. Within each of those high-level groups, we have a series of types of use case. So within Group A around safety and emergency, there are things we can do to support authorities. There are things we can do to support the emergency services, for example. This allows us to group a very long list of services into some bite-sized chunks that allow us to work out how we intervene and how we develop. Within each of those, we have some detailed service descriptions, and you will see that those service descriptions are narrative. We're talking about a narrative description of what the service should deliver. We're not talking about the technology. The technology and the standards will follow. We're talking about narrative description to allow us all to equally understand. When we talk about Service A 1.1, vehicle connectivity makes it possible to provide real-time notifications, we're all fundamentally talking about the same thing. And this is when, with no respect to my own personal safety, I actually get the props out. 2 phones, an Android phone and an Apple iPhone. Both of those phones have WhatsApp on, and I could write a narrative description of what I want WhatsApp to be. It's an end-to-end encrypted messaging services that allows us to message individuals and groups, I could describe that in the way we've described the services there. And I don't need to describe the technology, I don't need to describe the underlying standards or how it works. As a user, all I'm interested in is whichever device I have WhatsApp on, it meets that narrative description. And actually the way that WhatsApp is implemented on an iPhone and an Android phone and an iPhone is different. The technology is different, the operating system is different, the way it interacts with that operating system is different. The networks are different, the way the networks interact is complex and is something I need to understand. All I know is that WhatsApp looks the same on that as it does on that, and when I send a message on that, it appears on that. The technology beyond that is complex, and unfortunately there are lots of people who are thinking about that and making that work. The same is true here. There will be a lot to do in the background, and we are the people in this room that will do that. But the first thing we need to do, in the same way that you can describe WhatsApp and everyone understands what you mean, we need to define the services in a way that everyone can understand, because that then allows us to focus our efforts and think about the types of investment and technology and standards and work with Europe and work with whoever else and the things we can learn from other sectors. All these things start to flow out of having a common understanding of the standards. So this is where the connected vehicle framework is. This is a very similar presentation to the one that I've presented recently, well, a number of times over the last 6 months or so to the private and public sector. And this is the thing that we've consulted on up to now, and we've done quite a lot of consultation around this. And this is the basis of some of the services you're going to hear about later today and see demonstrated tomorrow. It's about how do we start to show the technologies that could lead to delivering that framework. We will be developing from that, and I know when I stand up on stage you all expect me to announce millions of pounds of funding because I've done that before. I'd love to do that, but I can't today. But maybe soon, maybe I will be able to. Maybe this will develop. And if we don't do the work we need to do now, then we never will be able to announce funding. If we do the work, then maybe we can. What I want to do now, I want to hand over to Jo. So Jo helped us with some research, some testing of this with local authorities and with the private sector earlier this year, which gives a real understanding of where our thinking is compared to where the sector's thinking is, and a real sense of how people perceive this, and the work that we need to do to get everybody on the same page and thinking about this as the way forward, as the thing we will deliver to ensure we get connectivity in the UK. So I'd like to ask Jo to come to the stage and just talk about the work we've done interacting with the sector.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm an independent facilitator for this work as we did some informal consultations. The first thing I'd like to do though, before we move forward, is just to acknowledge you as a sector. I've worked across many sectors. What I observed in your sector was so much enthusiasm, so much commitment and willingness to actually make progress, and so much opportunity and willingness to collaborate. So who took part in the consultations that we did December and also in February? Just a quick show of hands, people in the room. Great. And before I share with you the findings of the work that we've done together, I just want you all to acknowledge yourselves and give yourselves a round of applause. Because you are actually in an incredible sector. So my job is to try and consolidate all of the data that you shared with us into some high-level insights over the next 15 minutes. So forgive me if you were in some of those workshops and your point isn't quite articulated on screen. Believe me, we have got literally reels and reels of information and insight that's incredibly important that we're using going forward. So, who did we consult with? And this is something that I think is incredibly important. The actual depth and breadth of the sector is quite incredible. So from a public sector perspective, all of these people and all of these highways authorities across England, and the roles that are really important. So the intersection of strategy, innovation and operational delivery gave us a really good insight right across the piece. And then from a supply chain perspective as well, real breadth and depth across the supply chain as well, broad market coverage, lots of senior roles, which is absolutely fantastic. So the purpose of these informal consultations, you've heard from Darren already and probably many times before about the CVS framework. So we wanted to stress test that and validate the direction of travel, identify any barriers to adoption, but also what was really important was to not make this, here are all the problems, but actually what can we do together to solve that and to overcome some of the challenges that we're going to face. So you've heard already from Darren about what we actually consulted on, and it was the CVS framework, its direction of travel, and also the services and use cases as well. So here's what you said, and I mean trying to consolidate from both sides of the sector into 3 bullet points each is like quite a challenge. So from a local authority perspective, there's probably no great surprises in what I'm about to share with you next, that actually you saw CVS as an evolution of existing transport systems and a way in which you can proactively manage the network and in a cost-effective and efficient way. And so that this can be, this is an enabler of safer modal transport. And from a supply chain perspective, what's been really encouraging is that you're already there, technically willing, able to deliver CVS, because it would have been a bit problematic, I think, had we discovered that actually we want to do all this and move forward, but the supply chain hasn't been built. So we don't really need to worry about that. You also told us that this gave you some great opportunities commercially to grow, and that quite a number of you are already delivering at an international level. So that was massively encouraging. So I think the key takeaway for us all is that we've got a really great starting point. The sector is aligned, and actually you've all confirmed that you support the direction of travel with CVS. From a local authorities perspective, this has been quite interesting and helpful to us as we keep refining the work going forward, because I think some of the ways that we described the services was quite interesting to hear how you actually see this. So you were telling us that you see CVS as an end-to-end, in an end-to-end operational service perspective. So you're thinking quite rightly about the outcomes that this will deliver, rather than perhaps the way we might have consulted with you along the sort of data flows and the technical architecture as well. A really key point that was made several times over is that languaging of this is super important. So I know whilst Darren has explained so many times the term vehicles and what that actually means, it's not just cars or transport in that sense. I know what we heard from local authorities was how we language and frame that going forward is going to be really important, because it strengthens the case for adoption, and also how you sell this to multiple stakeholders for the public benefit as well. But you also told us that CVS supports safer and more integrated transport networks. No great surprise, I don't think, because we've heard a lot about this, that you told us that data is a real strategic enabler, and that from a local authority perspective, you're already collecting a lot of data. You're pretty comfortable in collecting data and using connected data. But actually the focus now for us needs to be on more around governance and ownership. So who governs the data? Who owns the data? How do we ensure that we're not duplicating where we're buying or using data? And one key concern was around perhaps we might get locked in, or we're already in contracts with certain vendors. How can we then share and open up that data as well? So the sort of key takeaway from that insight was clear frameworks are needed that are going to support both local authorities and suppliers, so that we are reducing data duplication and so that we can enable services to scale more easily. Any great surprises there? Anybody sitting there thinking, ooh, no? Okay. We also talked about what might be the barriers to adoption. So I think one of the most encouraging things here is that to unlock adoption at scale, these are not technology barriers that we need to overcome, but they're more structural challenges. And there's probably no great surprises here. There was some crossover between certain barriers and challenges that both sides of the sector, so local authorities and supply chain, identified. Skills being a big one, procurement being another, funding and data and standards. But as I said, it's quite encouraging that what we really need to do now is focus on how do we enable our whole system through some coordinated action, which is kind of in our hands to be able to do, so that we can progress this. What you also confirmed is, because lots of people ask, so where do we start and how do we do this? And you were looking for some guidance from government actually on how to do this. And some of you are already adopting these services. And so 3 parts to this, and you're going to hear a bit more about probably do now and do next tomorrow. So as you experience some of the technology, there's a 3rd consultative session. And in that session, what we want to be able to share with you are 21 initial priorities. And we want to hear from you, get your perspective and your judgment on, are these the right 21 priorities? Have we missed anything significant that we need to include? So we've now got a really good validated structure for what do we do now, what do we do next, and what do we do later? So that should help with some guidance in terms of moving this forward. So in terms of a sector, where are we? If I could summarise this, how are we moving forward? So we've done an awful lot of understanding and education and consulting many, many times, as Darren has said, over a number of months, many, many groups as well. And where we are now is that as a sector, we're actually aligned. So the next steps really are about how do we create the conditions and the environment to enable adoption and to scale that as well. So I think it's probably fair to say that we've got pretty strong awareness around the direction now and the validation of CVS. It's a good thing. We support it. There's been a lot of energy and enthusiasm around it. And local authorities are definitely up for this, understanding the opportunity. Suppliers have probably been a little bit frustrated that, you know, we're here and we're ready and we've got some commercial opportunity that we can harness here as well. And you probably want to move more quickly. Suppliers in the room, does that reflect where you're coming from with this? Any nods or raised hands? Okay, nobody, yeah, a few raised hands there as well. So as I said, the next step with this is just to keep moving forward with creating conditions that enable authorities to adopt services and to help the market deliver these services at scale. So what are we doing to respond to your feedback? Well, there are a number of things, and WSP colleagues that are in the room, can you raise your hands as well? Because you've got a real sort of input to this, aren't you, and supporting this work as well. We've taken all of your insight, all of your feedback, that's helping us to refine service definitions, to create guidance for the sector, things like use cases, fact sheets that will become available. We are undergoing standards and interoperability discussions as well. We are exploring, you'll probably be pleased to know, procurement and delivery pathways. A really big thing that came out of the informal consultations is how do we share knowledge? Because so many are doing things already. So can we create some enabling platform that helps us to share things so that we're not duplicating effort? And another big thing that came out of the consultations were we actually really need some help in comms. So how do we sell this better to our stakeholder community? How do we get leadership to buy into this more easily? So we think there is a huge and great opportunity ahead. The encouraging thing is the supply chain is there, it's ready, it's willing, it's not waiting to be built. Authorities are not waiting to be convinced. This paints a very encouraging picture that, one, you validated the CVS framework and that you support it, big tick. We've already got capability that exists across the market. Your confidence, every time we do sessions like this, we ask a confidence level, and your confidence is growing in this as well. So the big challenge and the big opportunity going forward, and our focus now, I'm sure you'll agree, Darren, is how do we harness all this? How do we keep building on the momentum that's already been created and actually translate that into the practical stuff that we can deliver this at scale? And there we are.
Right, just a couple more minutes from me before we get into a panel session. And this is to talk about the Manual for Smart Streets, which we've talked about for a number of years now and which we've funded previously, which exists. And this really is about rethinking it, because the Manual for Smart Streets, which we delivered about 3 or 4 years ago now, has been underused. And we built a really useful framework for how we would provide kind of cradle-to-grave guidance from inception right through to delivery and operation for technology. How would local authorities do that? And having built that framework and populated it with some use cases, we didn't really make a lot of it. And that's, you know, we've had other things to do. We've never really been able to put the resource into it. We had it there and never really used it. But we now have a really strong opportunity to start to do that. And one of the pieces of work that we will be taking forward in parallel to the CVS work and the work that myself and Jo have just talked about is rethinking the Manual for Smart Streets and turning it into a single point of guidance for how we deliver digital services. So as we move from the CVS framework as a set of narrative aspirations for what services should be, as we move into providing support and guidance and reacting to what we've heard in our consultation work about what people need. As we move into that phase, the Manual for Smart Streets will start to become the resource that we use, a central resource we use supporting local authorities and supply chains to deliver technology. Now, many of you in this room will be aware of DMRB, the Design Manual for Roads and Bridges, which National Highways maintain. That provides a single source of standards, brings standards together, brings guidance together for how you design hard infrastructure. Many of you will be aware of the Manual for Streets, which is a long-standing, very successful resource provided by, well, my division of the department, not me, but my division, which talks about how you design physical infrastructure, how you design public realm, and how you do that in a way that provides the best outcome we can. Manual for Smart Streets really is about how we do that for digital realm, how we use that to provide digital services, and increasingly digital services will be how do we deliver the CVS framework. So how do we support the CVS framework? Manual for Smart Streets will increasingly be key to how we do that. So just to remind you what it is, do we have any audio?
The lines, the pavement, the build.
Right, let's try it.
What is a street? The road itself, the lines, the pavement, the buildings, the traffic. Managing traffic has always been a headache for a road authority, or it has been ignored as too difficult. And while technology is now available to make that job easier, expectations are also rising as people increasingly use information services to plan their journeys. Streets are getting smarter. Thanks to technologies like machine vision and the Internet of Things creating a much richer picture of the world, and open data linked to mobile communications, improving journey planning and management applications, we're changing how we manage the streets. Smart streets use this technology as the foundation for cooperative traffic management services. This allows smarter management of traffic information, traffic management, and data management, signal control, air quality management, vulnerable road user safety, parking, EV charging, public transport, joined-up mobility, also known as mobility as a service, transport payment, and asset management. Smart street technology is part of a bigger set of processes, services, and system, with strategies for the architecture of your on, at, and in-road technologies, adherence to standards, integration, and data access. This can be daunting, but the Manual for Smart Streets can help. It shows a series of use cases for how to get the most out of your existing infrastructure and what to consider when upgrading or procuring new technology. Find out more at ttf.uk.net/MFSS.
So that video is now, Paul, how, 3 years old? Do you think?
Completely forgotten I'd ever made it.
That must be a nice surprise then. I think that video is about 3 years old now, and some of the terminology is slightly dated, but actually it still talks about the right things, and it still talks about the things that we want to deliver as part of the Connected Vehicle Services Framework. Many of you will have seen that before, and the reason for showing it is just to remind you what Manual for Smart Streets was. And it will start to develop now. We will start to move forward and start to use it more as the way that we express the guidance and standards you need to support delivery of digital services. And we will start to use the Manual for Smart Streets as a way in which we support a lot of the great activity that happens in the community already about building and owning standards, maintaining standards, developing new standards families, linking into Europe, all the types of things that need to happen in the background to provide the platform for us to build services on. Manual for Smart Streets gives us that opportunity to start to do that and collect that together. So, although it was developed quite some time ago, and it most certainly hasn't fulfilled its potential yet, the point of this presentation is to tell you that it will, and we are absolutely going to invest in it as that single resource that does as we always said we would do, and thinks about objectives, thinks about impacts. This is a screen grab from the website, which is still there, and which is still absolutely the right model to use. It does need to expand, but it is the right model to use because it allows people to think about policy outcomes. I want to improve air quality. I want to expedite goods and traffic, goods movement. I want to create a fairer society or allow people to become more active. By starting at that point, it allows us to start from a policy perspective, and then the guide guides you through the technologies and the services that you would need to deliver that. And this is a way in which we'll structure the Connected Services Framework to think about policy linkages. And this is what the manual Smart Streets will do. And it will continue to think about this life cycle, because it's no point turning up and saying, right, I want to procure some stuff, let's get on and procure something. You need to start a lot earlier. You need to have a structured view of starting with the vision, starting with the high-level needs that you want to meet, starting with things like theory of change and those kind of models that understand how you want to deliver. The Manual for Smart Street can guide you through that. It already does for some use cases, and it will increasingly for connected services. Guide you right through the process to evaluation and procurement, operation, and even decommissioning, the whole life cycle of how you deliver technology. This will help provide the support to do that. As I say, we have some work already. There are some use cases around asset management and EV charging, parking management. They're there already. They will be refreshed and expanded until the point where we have guidance for each of the connected services areas that we have identified, and it will grow and become a kind of living online document to support that work. Because ultimately, we're going to deliver something like that, and it probably won't look like that, but it will. And some of you will recognise the left-hand side as kind of the UTMC model that we've promoted for many years now. But that model is going to have to expand. There are going to be lots of new things to do, like build aggregators, work with Google and Waze, work with national highways, deliver apps and services and link to proprietary data, link to different road operators in different geographic areas so we get consistency. There will be some model that will not look nothing like that, but will be that. And we will need to deliver that kind of interactive model to be able to deliver services that use and supply data to people that need it, provide geographical and functional connectivity so that a service that works in Leicestershire also works in Northamptonshire, a service that works on a local road also works on a strategic road. We will need a model like that, and the Manual for Smart Streets will be about how we deliver that. Because the one thing we won't do in this country is we won't deliver that centrally. It won't be government's job to do that. It'll be the local authorities, it'll be the combined authorities, it'll be the authorities that already deliver urban traffic management and UTC. It'll be their job to work out how to deliver services in their area in a coordinated way. We will help, obviously, at a national level, how we aggregate data and share it, but the Manual for Smart Streets will become the model that describes how we deliver that. And some of the work that we'll be doing over the coming years is working on what that architecture actually needs to look like. What does an actual architecture for how you deliver services look like? And once we have that, that's moving beyond the stage we're at now. That's moving beyond thinking about narrative descriptions into technical descriptions. Once we have that, Manual for Smart Streets will be there to support how we actually deliver that. So, at the moment, we've not really moved forward with it, but I think by this time next year, we will be absolutely wanting your involvement in that, wanting your help to help us design the Manual for Smart Streets, helping it ensure it provides the right guidance in the right way for local authorities and suppliers to be able to build the types of systems and technologies we need to deliver connected services. So thank you.